Hi, I'm Rachel. I'm going to talk about flipping the switch on student behavior. So, there are, of course, oftentimes a lot of unwanted or disruptive student behaviors that we have to manage and deal with on a day to day basis. But I'm going to teach you some of the strategies that I think are really helpful in managing these behaviors and actually taking a proactive stance before the behaviors occur in the first place. So I do not really tend to gravitate toward the behavior charts and systems that you might find on Pinterest or the PBIS strategies that your school may implement. I think those are okay, but they are not really individualized for the specific student. So I feel like we're often given a one size fits all approach when really we need to be individualizing plans for students as needed. So I'm going to share my screen. All right, so here I talk about the flip approach, FLIP. So first is F, focus. So I would encourage you to pick your battles. So I work with middle school students and I love them. I think it's one of the most fun ages to teach, but there are a lot of little attitudes and sassy behaviors that I see. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of picking your battles. So oftentimes people, especially those who are not maybe used to working with that age group, might say, "Oh, they are being so disrespectful when they roll their eyes." I'm like, well, really, I don't really care if students roll their eyes if they are doing the work and putting forth their best effort and meeting me halfway for the lesson. So that's a battle that I am not going to really pick unless it's accompanied by more disruptive or more disrespectful behavior. Again, what you choose to address is going to depend on you. I just think that it is really important to pick your battles and choose what you really want to what you really want to address and not get bogged down in every little possible thing, because the more you try to control every student's behavior, the more resistance you're going to have. And especially with those who maybe are on the defiant end of the spectrum, they're going to meet you and push against that wall, and it's going to be going, a tug of war match, which is what you really do not want. As soon as you enter that power struggle, you've already lost, they've said. So really focus on the behaviors that you really want to address and that you think are really important for the student and for the other students in the classroom, that you do address. And then I would say do it as much as possible in private. Students often want to get a reaction from either you or their peers or both. So if you could take away that audience and address that in private, so much the better. Even if you have to circle around or set up students an independent activity and pull the student aside, it is only going to help you. So next on our list is listen. L is for listen. So chances are you don't get the full picture of why the student is reacting a certain way. You might understand and have background knowledge on that student or on that behavior and why the student is motivated to do that behavior. But chances are you might not have the full picture. So I had a student once who often would completely shut down, put her head on the desk. I didn't know why. I didn't know if it was lack of sleep or just lack of motivation. And I found out later that she was actually experiencing some pretty traumatic events that were kind of recurring from her past. And I learned that from her parents and from her family. And it's like if I had gone and said, you know what, you were being so disrespectful and it was really hard on that student, I think it would have made that worse. So what I did was I said, you know what, you know that this is the assignment, you know that these are the expectations to complete the assignment. So if you need to put your head down, that's fine. However long you need, we're going to make it up at the end of the day. And the end of the day was more of a homework period, study hall, free time space. So the student very quickly realized on her own that it was best to get work done ahead of time. And then she also knew that I respected her enough that when she was really having a hard time and struggling and just had to put her head down, I wasn't going to beat her up about it. I was just going to say, okay, we'll make it up when you were ready, and we would do it later. So I cannot emphasize enough listening to the student. Even if they are not going to share what is going on, they might not even know. They might not even know what is their motivation for doing that behavior. But if you take a listening approach and you just let the student know, hey, I'm here for you. I'm here if you need to talk. I don't know what's going on with you or if something's the matter, but I'm here. So listening not just with your head, but with your heart and your body, and just letting the student know you were there for them. Next is intention. I is for intention. So you cannot control what everybody else does. This is something that I have to continually remind myself. I am not in control of my students. I cannot make them do anything that they truly do not want to do. So I can put forth consequences, I can put forth expectations, but at the end of the day, I cannot make them do anything. So what is the intention for myself? Well, if the intention is I want to create an environment where they are really engaged, then I'm going to react and behave differently than if my intention is just to force compliance. We have to remember that compliance is not the ultimate goal. We may need compliance as a stepping stone to true learning, but it is not the ultimate goal. So we have to always step back and look at the big picture. What is our intention? How do we want the students to feel? What do we want them to do? What do we want them to know? And maybe if they're a little bit sassy and pushing back just a little bit, maybe it's because they are appropriately at that stage where they're trying to gain more independence for themselves. We want them to be independent. We want them to think independently. We don't want them to take everything that an authority figure says at face value. We want them to think for themselves. So if they're just challenging me a little bit, well, I might have to redirect the behavior, or I might have to pull them aside and say, what's going on? What is this about? But they might also just be at that stage where they are appropriately trying to figure out how to be a little bit more independent. And it's going to be a learning process and a little bit rough around the edges before they can get there. So I want to make sure that I'm appropriately focusing on my intention and saying, okay, if this is not getting in the way of student learning and engagement, then maybe I'm going to let this go. Or maybe I'm going to set an intention to make my lesson so engaging, because I think this is such an important topic, that I'm going to set the intention to be so engaging and so excited about it that maybe that's expanding my sphere of influence, because students are naturally going to say, oh, she's really excited. What does she have to tell me? This must be really important. And those behaviors are falling away naturally. Then P. P is for proactivity. So we always hear be proactive, be proactive. We don't necessarily know what that means. I think of being proactive as thinking what is in my sphere of control and what is in my sphere of potential influence that I can do today to help myself and to help get the results that I want for me and my students. So it might be looking at cues and triggers that you notice are patterns. Just always be on the hunt for patterns. So coming back from lunch, when students come back from lunch, that is the number one time where little behaviors occur. They've all riled up. Maybe they even had a little bit of time at recess to play. Maybe there's something that kind of unstructured or less structured time is where students are getting into little fights with each other. That is the number one time that I see students having a really, really hard time controlling and managing their own behaviors. So the best thing that I did for that was I made the few minutes, 5 minutes after lunch, mindfulness time, turned off all the lights, put on soothing, meditative music. We all closed our eyes, and just having that time for all of us to kind of decompress and come down from that high of lunchtime was the best thing I could do to proactively decrease those undesirable behaviors. So that's my method, flip, FLIP, for flipping the switch on student behaviors. As always, feel free to leave questions, comments in the section below. We will try to respond. Thank you for watching.